Has anyone ever shared with you what happens in a layoff conversation? I mean, like what happens in the room? Like, what is your manager thinking? What is HR thinking? And what they can say and what they can't say? Probably not. But most importantly, has anyone ever shared with you how to protect yourself in that moment and maximize your outcome in what may very well be the worst moment of your career? Well, today I'm going to spill all the tea. How do I know? I know because I've spent 25 years as an HR business partner in Fortune 500 companies and other high growth organizations. And over the course of those years, I've participated in thousands of layoffs. I've been the one to participate in the town halls, making the announcements, meeting with individuals to let them know that their services were no longer needed. And I've been the one working with managers to help them make decisions on who's going to stay and who's going to go. Now, on the flip side, I've also been laid off 4 times over the course of my career. So I seriously doubt you'll come across anyone who has had my same exact experience. Now, if you're just joining me, what makes this podcast different from any other podcast? Well, in addition to my 360 view of the whole layoff experience, I am also an AI consultant, having extensive training and certification in artificial intelligence. And so while other career coaches are still giving 2019 advice and telling you, hey, just network more, et cetera, I'm actually showing you how to use AI to prepare strategic questions, do very good competitive intelligence gathering, and also decoding legal language that's often used in these separation conversations. I've invested hundreds of hours in AI training, and I've specifically focused on career strategies because I saw where the job market was going a couple of years ago. So I seriously doubt that you'll find anyone with this profile or with this background, particularly with the layoff experience from both sides of the table. And so that's exactly the perspective that I'm bringing to this podcast, Exit to Excel. So if you are coming back, having been with us before, then welcome back. Glad to have you. And if this is your first time, then welcome. Know that this is the podcast where we take career setbacks and turn them into opportunities with truth, tools, and transformation. I am your untraditional HR business partner, someone who is actually on your side. And so today I am talking about the actual layoff conversation, and I'm going to tell you the things that HR will not tell you. Now, before we get started any further, if you have not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Also, hit the like button and also share it because there are so many people that are unemployed and the job market continues to be a little bit challenging. So I'm sure there's someone that you know that can also share, use this information. Also, follow me on my social media. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook at Exit to Excel. And I'll be on LinkedIn pretty soon. So be on the lookout for that. Also, feel free to DM me, comment on my post. I love hearing from you and answering your questions. So be sure to do that for me as of right now. All right. So let's get started with today's episode about the layoff conversation. So, what most people do not know is that the layoff conversation is planned weeks in advance, sometimes months in advance. And every single word that management says and HR says is scripted. We tell the managers, we give them a script, and we tell them, do not deviate from the script. And why is that? Well, that's because every document has been reviewed and vetted by legal. And we have also anticipated any possible question that you may ask. Now, let's break that down a little bit more, and I'm going to share with you what's really going on behind the scenes. One, legal has reviewed the approved language to minimize liability. HR practices the conversation multiple times to make sure that we have our ducks in a row. And we work with managers and provide them with the script, and we tell them what to say and what not to say. And we've also arranged for security protocols around your exit. Now, in these conversations, HR has three goals while we're in that room. One is the legal protection, making sure that we don't say anything that can be used against us or the company. The second thing is emotional management, trying our best to keep you calm and compliant. And then three is efficient execution, and that is getting you out of the building or off of the call as quickly as possible. Now, some of you are probably wondering, like I have many times, but I kind of know how the deal is, why your manager, who you may have worked with for 10, 15 years, or your HR manager, who you may have, known and had a very good relationship with, now all of a sudden act like you stole something. They're very stoic, they're very unemotional, and they're very mechanical. Well, unfortunately, that is for a reason because, as what I've just laid out, we have a very specific script that we have to go by, and we have to make the conversation very, very quick. And unfortunately, the conversation comes off as being very cold and uncaring, but know that that is not how we feel. Oftentimes, we are thinking these things, but we can't say it. We are thinking we chose you because you were the safest and least likely to sue. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies will go through what they call an adverse impact analysis to make sure that not one particular group is being more disparately, or adversely impacted than another group. And so therefore, if you are deemed as being like low risk in that aspect, then, we kind of get the green light to go ahead and release you. Another thing we're thinking but can't say is that, hey, your manager fought for you but lost. And trust me, I have been in many fights and battles with managers who have fought for their employees. And unfortunately, the decision is not up to them, right? And so while we know that in these conversations, we're not allowed to say that. The next thing we're thinking but can't say is that, hey, your severance package is negotiable, but we're not going to tell you that, right? I mean, we're not going to just, open the door for that, but that is something you need to know going into the conversation. And then the last thing we're thinking but not saying is that we are afraid and worried of how you're going to react. Because the fact of the matter is, it's a very sensitive situation. And we've all been involved in some pretty difficult conversations. And we just pray that you will be nice and take it easy on us. Now, I'm going to share with you an AI prompt that you can use in the event that you may be anticipating a layoff and how you can best handle the conversation. So, and I'll also put it down in the comments so you can cut and paste it there and just keep it for future reference. And as a matter of fact, I would advise you go ahead and use this prompt and prepare, because as I say, hey, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So the prompt is, help me prepare for a potential layoff conversation. Based on my role as, and put your position there, at, and put in your company, what questions should I ask to protect my interests? What information should I request in writing? What legal rights should I be aware of? And then create a strategic question list that maximizes my leverage and outcome. Now, this is the thing. We have a script, so you absolutely need to have one too. Now, if you listen to, I think it was 2 episodes ago, I talk about what happens right during a layoff, like what to do within the first 48 hours. I go into a lot of detail in terms of the information you need to keep or make record of and the questions you need to ask. So I would definitely go back and listen to that podcast as well, because it goes into a lot, deeper, information context in terms of exactly what to ask and what to do in those first 48 hours that you are notified. Now, let's decode the language that HR is using when they're having these meetings and these layoff conversations, because every phrase is carefully chosen for a specific reason. And understanding the real meaning gives you power. So when we say the decision wasn't about your performance, what we mean is that we chose you for business reasons and not performance reasons. What we're not saying, though, is that we did evaluate your performance when making the choice. And what your response can be, hey, can you put that in writing for reference purposes? Right. Now, I will say that we don't typically, or at least in my experience, we don't typically amend severance agreements or provide things that aren't part of the standard language and package, but you can absolutely try. But just so that if it is a layoff, which means that either your role was eliminated or maybe your duties were, consolidated under someone else or another unit, performance is taken into consideration, particularly if there are some people who are going to be left behind and there are only a select few out of a department or unit that's chosen. Performance is usually one of the criterion that we evaluate. Now, another thing that we say is that this was a difficult decision for the company. What we really mean is that we agonize over the financial numbers, like how many heads do we have to cut? What we're not saying is that it wasn't difficult to choose you specifically. Now, I say sometimes because managers do agonize on having to let their team go, especially if they have a high performing team and performance was not a factor at all. It is absolutely an agonizing decision. Now, you can absolutely ask what factors were considered in making this decision. And they will probably have some response for you. Now, whether it's the response that you're looking for, the one that you want, that's a different story. But I would absolutely ask that question. Now, another thing we're thinking, or another um, thing you'll hear is, we're eliminating your position. Well, what does that really mean? It means that we are restructuring to cut costs. What we're not saying is that we might go and recreate this position with a different title later on. And I know a lot of people have experienced this. Their job is eliminated, right? But they will see their exact same job description, maybe with a different title and probably at a lower level. That happens all the time. So, what you can ask is, hey, is my question going to be backfilled or redistributed? And see what answer you get. Now, another thing we'll say is that, hey, this severance package is generous. What we mean is that we're offering more than is legally required. But what we're not saying is that, hey, it's still negotiable. And so your response should always be, I'd like to review this with an advisor. Now, if you are age 40 or above, you will have either 21 or 45 days to review your agreement, and that is required by law. If you are under the age of 40, then I think there's a little bit more flexibility. But what I've seen in my experience is that we mostly give people between 10 and 15 days if you're under the age of 40. But you are absolutely within your right to ask for time to review it. Never sign it on the spot. I will say that. Never sign it on the spot. Now, if they tell you we need to sign this today, what they mean is that they want to close this out quickly because they're probably nervous that you are going to file a claim or something. What they're not letting you know, though, is that you have legal rights to review it. And so your response should be, hey, I understand the timeline and I'll need X amount of days to review it properly. And again, that's where you can do your homework to determine exactly how many days you will have. Okay, now let's go into the questions that we absolutely don't want you to ask, and why they matter. So, question number one is, what's the selection criteria for who was laid off? Now, why we don't like this question is because it could reveal discriminatory patterns, but you will need it because it provides legal protection in the event you suspect discrimination. Now, we will deflect to say, hey, it was based on business needs. That's always going to be our default. But you can follow up and ask specifically for the criteria in writing. Now, again, whether you get it, I think it depends on the organization. Honestly, in my experience, we have never provided that amount of detail in writing or even in a conversation, but you can try. Now, another question you'll want to ask is, am I eligible for rehire? Now, we will not commit to, we'll be very careful to say, yes, you're eligible, because we don't want to create future obligation. And why you'll want to know that is that it can affect your future opportunities and references. Now, you may hear a deflection of, oh, we'll address that if it comes up. But I think most people will say, hey, you're either eligible or not eligible. And again, if it wasn't based on performance and it's a true elimination, then you should be eligible for rehire. And then if you want to follow up and say, I like that document in my severance agreement, you can absolutely say that. Now, here's another question. Who will handle my reference checks about my employment? For the most part, we haven't had an issue with people asking about their reference checks, but some organizations may not want to answer this because it locks them into a specific narrative. You'll want it because you'll want to know what is being said about your professional reputation. Now, they may deflect and say, we're going to adhere to our standard reference policies, but then you can follow up and say, hey, can I get a reference letter now while my contributions are still fresh? Now, another question you can ask is, can my unused vacation time be paid out as a lump sum? Most companies now do pay out your vacation in a lump sum, particularly if your severance is being paid out in a lump sum. But again, it depends on your company policy. And that is something you can absolutely find out in advance. Now, companies may not want to do this because it does cost money. It can set a precedent, but you may need it because, of course, if you're losing that income, this could be a significant amount of money for you. Now, the response they may give you is that it'll be handled through standard payroll, which even if it's paid out in a lump sum, is still going to be paid out in accordance to their payroll schedule more than likely. So then your follow-up should be, well, what's the timeline? And more importantly, what is going to be the tax treatment for that payment? Unfortunately, if all of your vacation is paid out in a lump sum, it is going to be taxed as a bonus. But again, that is something that you will want to verify with your HR department or your payroll department. And then lastly, is the severance package negotiable? We're not going to open up that can of worms because we don't automatically want to open up the door to negotiation. But if you negotiate, know that it can significantly improve your outcome. Now, you'll always get the standard response. This is our standard package. This is what everyone is getting. Your follow-up can be, okay, well, I'd like to discuss the terms with my advisor before signing. And again, once you've had a time to go through that package, you can absolutely go back and ask for another meeting, say, okay, I've had a chance to review it, and then, go through the points of the package that you would like to negotiate. Okay, so let's talk about the negotiation of the package and what you can negotiate, because again, we're not going to just lay it out for you in terms of what is negotiable in your package. We're probably going to say, no, it's not negotiable. But depending on the circumstances, you may absolutely have leverage to negotiate. So I want to share with you the things you should be negotiating on, or the, commonly negotiated items. One is the severance amount. Now, as I talked about, it's all about leverage here. So if you have leverage or institutional knowledge, then that gives you a little bit more negotiating power. The severance timing, lump sum versus payments, because again, that's going to affect your taxes and your cash flow. Now, I believe a lot of companies are now giving severance payments in a lump sum versus salary continuation, meaning that if you're getting 19 weeks of severance, then it will be paid out into your, in accordance with your normal payroll schedule. A lot of times they'll pay in a lump sum so they can go ahead and get you off their payroll and their records. But you can ask. In my experience, there hasn't been a lot of flexibility in that, but it definitely doesn't hurt to ask, particularly if you're with a smaller organization that may have a little bit more leeway. Health insurance extension beyond the standard COBRA timelines. That is also something you can negotiate. Your reference agreement. Make sure you go ahead and lock in those positive references. Non-compete waivers. Now, this has been a hot topic in the courts lately, where the courts have deemed that a lot of these non-compete waivers are overly restrictive and may prohibit people from being able to get gainful employment once they're separated. So I would definitely take a look at your non-compete waiver and negotiate having some of those restrictions removed if you deem it necessary. And then outplacement services. A lot of companies partner with outplacement services like Lee Hecht Harrison, Right Management. Oh gosh, the other one just left my brain. But these are companies that work with you to help you find another job. If that is not part of your package, then I would absolutely request it. Or I've also seen the reverse. Maybe it's part of your package and you don't need it, so you can ask for the monetary equivalent, paid out to you. So again, that's just something that you can negotiate. Now, when we talk about leverage, when I say leverage, this is what I mean by leverage. One is if you have institutional knowledge and if they really need for you to transfer that knowledge, within the organization, you use that as leverage. Client relationships. We want a smooth transition. So if you are, very embedded with the client, have very strong relationships, you can absolutely use that as leverage in negotiating your severance. Legal concerns. Now, if you have documentation or any kind of proof around potential discrimination, or that your termination is wrongful, then you absolutely have leverage to negotiate. And I have seen people come back with their records and discussed it to say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. I really would not like to take this to an attorney. So let's see if we can come up with an amicable agreement. So that is a huge one. And it's a huge leverage point if you happen to have any documentation or anything indicating that. And then public relations, particularly for high profile departments, that could be a public relations nightmare. That is also leverage because we want to keep the waters calm and stay positive in the public eye as much as we can. So if that may be an issue, then you have leverage. Okay. Now, again, companies negotiate a lot more than employees realize. We just don't advertise. They just don't tend to advertise it. But as I like to say, hey, closed mouths don't get fed. And at the end of the day, you can ask, and the worst thing they can tell you is no, right? I mean, I tried to negotiate with my last one and it didn't work. And I understood because I'm in HR what the package was, and I didn't really have any leverage. So it was what it was, but I asked. Now, how do you protect yourself in a moment? Here's how you protect yourself when you're actually in the conversation. One is your emotional regulation. Take notes during the conversation. That helps to calm you down. It keeps you focused, and you're also going to be able to document everything, which is very important. Ask for clarification on anything you don't understand. And again, do not sign anything in the moment. You need to have time to review it, and that is your right. Secondly, information gathering. Request all the information in writing. Get contact information for follow up questions. Normally, that would be your HR business partner. And then ask about the timeline for decision making. For example, when do you have to get back to them, or when do you have to get your signed agreement back? And then strategic positioning. Thank them for the opportunities you've had. And I know sometimes that's hard when you are being dismissed and you're told your service is no longer needed. But trust me, we talk about it. And when I say we, I mean HR. We talk about the ones who were so gracious, who were so complimentary, and who made the process so much easier despite the circumstances. And it goes a long way. So thank them for the opportunities you've had with the company. Express your commitment for a smooth transition, and position yourself to be collaborative and not adversarial. Like I said, we talk about, the very, very good ones, and we talk about the very, very bad ones. And unfortunately, how you leave will probably speak louder, longer than how you performed during your tenure at the company. That's just how it is. So, there you have it. I've laid it out to you what really goes on in the layoff conversation. Hopefully that's been helpful to you. But know that the layoff conversation doesn't have to be something that happens to you. It's all about perspective. And with the right perspective and the questions and the right AI strategy, you can influence the outcome even in your worst professional moment. Now, this is your homework. Even if you're not facing a layoff right now, go ahead and prepare. Like I said, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Because if you are caught, unexpectedly, as I have been before, you're not able to think as clearly, and there's going to be some things you're going to miss. So go ahead and do your homework. Go ahead and prepare. That includes, what questions you're going to ask. Use some of the AI prompts I provided for you. I do have more. So if you are interested in more detailed prompts, if you think you are going to be facing a layoff and you're in that situation right now, then send me a note. You can even email me at info@exit2excel.com, and I'll share those other deeper AI prompts with you. And I also offer emergency consultations, because sometimes that one-on-one strategic conversation can save you thousands of dollars or even months of job searching. So reach out to me for that as well. So again, there you have it. And this is Exit to Excel, because know that even in your darkest professional moment, you can absolutely exit to Excel, because you have the power and it's more than you realize. So this is LeTonya signing off. See you next time.